Hey everyone, welcome to the new moon forecast for the new moon we have coming up in Cancer. I'm Kendall with the Bohemian Tarot Girl.
And I'm Amy with Wild Reawakening, and we are coming together for the Cancer new moon, which is happening July 5th at 3:54 p.m. Pacific time, and it's happening at 14 degrees of Cancer, which means because it's a new moon that the moon and the sun are at the exact same degree point. So if you want a little more information on where this is going to affect you, you can look at your birth chart and see which house 14 degrees of Cancer falls in, and that will give you some idea around the themes that might be coming up for you with this moon.
This moon is like an emotional roller coaster. I feel like, oh man, it's gonna really open up like your subconscious and your, conscious, like what we're conscious in, like where our ego stands, and really kind of like mesh them together in order for us to see really everything behind it. It's kind of coming at it not just from like the moon. There's like everything else that's coming into play that's very focused on this. How are you
Oh,
feeling about it?
this is going to be one of our more intense moons for sure. New moon energy is usually about starting new beginnings and our direction forward and setting intentions for the way that we want to move and what we want to bring into our life. Um, However, there's a lot of external things that are going on with this moon that can kind of take precedence. I mean, there's definitely an inner element that is happening as well, but it's really going to highlight the emotional intensity, how much emotional awareness you have about yourself. Cancer is a water sign, and it is ruled by the moon. So it just brings in this extra emphasis on your emotional realm and your emotional field and your security and safety uh,
Yes.
and with all the other energies kind of creating an element of upheaval and chaos, holding on to your inner landscape of where you feel safe, connected, your intuitive awareness, um, and how you maintain your own emotional balance and boundaries is going to be very, very important during this time.
It really is. And it's interesting to me when I looked at it, it's sandwiched between the two full moons in Capricorn that we're having. So we had the one that's the early one. And then we're going to end, and it's July 21st. That's going to be the one that's the later full moon in Capricorn. And I feel like there's, when we're looking at the cycles, you're looking at like the connection, and you really have this. Here is like the material world. This is what you're trying to bring in and manifest and create with that Capricorn energy. And it's really tied into obviously this huge kind of like destruction, and then the ability to see, to rebuild with this emotional like change that we all have to go through. And I think, some people are going to be really, it's going to be a little bit easier for them. There might be some realizations, and then there are other people that it might be a lot more stressful, and it might be a lot more of a tower moment, especially when you're thinking about, um, if you're emotional, if you're connected to your emotions, I think you're going to breeze through this moon a lot easier than people who really fight against emotions and are really stuck more in that ego-centered space. So that that's something that I would, warn you about, is that if you have people in your life that are a little more cut and dry, they don't like to process their emotions, they don't like to look at their emotions, they're really just focused in on kind of themselves and how they are going through life. There's probably going to be some huge moments where things pop up into their world that are going to get them to really sit back and take stock of emotions and how they come into play, and really hopefully hopefully it'll prompt them to do some really deep reflections. Because you don't want to like arm yourself with all this like emotional baggage and like tote it around for the rest of your life. Like that's not fun. And I feel like this is the big one that's going to help kind of people realize it and help shed it. So I'm hoping, it might feel stressful for a lot of people out there, and just be aware of those people around you. But I think it's going to be really freeing for them if they kind of recognize it and embrace it. And hopefully they will. So even if they're not spiritually connected.
I mean, one can hope, but really the majority of people are not sitting around listening to astrology podcasts and paying any attention to what the energies are around them, which is why when we started really paying attention to the astrological landscape and the energies that kind of cycled through that, it gave us a perspective of how to work with the energies instead of just having everything kind of take you by surprise.
Yep.
However, this is one of those moons where the emotions are going to rise to the surface. And if you're not used to expressing your emotions or even trying to feel your emotions, it can feel a little uncomfortable and a little intense, and you may react to that in a variety of different ways. And so just have kind of a sense of grace and be a little gentle with the people around you. And this is one of those moons where it's a really good idea to kind of chant the mantra to yourself that nothing anyone does has anything to do with you. Like everyone's looking at life through their own lens. They are experiencing their own reality in a certain way, and they're dealing with their emotions as they come up. And some people are good at that and some people aren't. And just really, really try not to take this personally at all. And there's actually, it reminds me of another transit that is going on. We do have Venus, which is also in Cancer, which is pretty close to where the sun and this moon are hitting at the same time. And Venus in Cancer wants, to be comfortable and in its home environment and have its security and, the nice homey type vibe to it. So it's actually a really beautiful placement because Cancer in itself is already such a deeply divine feminine sign in its best representation. So but this Venus in Cancer is squaring Chiron in Aries. And a square, when two planets create a square in the circle, the wheel that they're on, it is a pretty intense energy and sometimes uncomfortable, and it can bring up some conflict or agitation. And Chiron in itself is the wounded healer asteroid. And it being in Aries, it's a lot of stuff to do with inner child, freedom, kind of those kind of themes around it is really a sense of self and healing your sense of self. So this Venus squaring Chiron can have the energy behind it of bringing up old deep wounds that are coming to the surface. And when we bring up these old deep wounds, it also has the tendency to bring along really intense, deep-seated emotions that we've been stuffing down for a long time. So just extra emphasis on anything that is coming up right now. It is not personal. Don't take it personal. Don't put yourself in victim mentality if someone projects some of their own issues onto you.
But also hear people. I feel like that is, if you have the emotional availability to be able to hear people, I do feel like there's going to be some reflections coming through to you from people. And it's important, especially if you're not emotionally open a lot of times, go ahead and hear those people, and really, like you said, don't take it personally. It's not a personal thing, but they do have feelings that often come into play with your life. And so you have to be able to hear and find empathy with people and have those open communications that I really feel like this moon is really kind of like dragging up. And it's interesting, like you talked about the childhood wounds that are coming back. And I do feel like that's coming into play. There's another, you know, you have the sun and the moon, and it's also squaring those north node and the south node. And the north node is in Aries, the south node is in Libra. And to me, it's very much like you're looking at where you've come from and where you're like going. So you're breaking a cycle. And it's becoming aware of those past experiences and how they're playing into your current life and how it's emotionally blocking you from really being successful, really creating relationships within your life that are going to be beneficial as we move forward and really in alignment for what you want. Um, so that there's this important play of other people's emotions also being brought in and the reflection upon yourself. And you have to give yourself grace, but you also have to be willing to take in that information and see it through a lens of somebody else's view of you, and whether or not you need to change or reevaluate or open lines of communication that really have been lacking in your life. That's where I would encourage people to look, is where communication is lacking, where emotional connection is lacking in their life, and making sure that they're open and ready to receive it. So,
Yeah, because on the flip side of this Cancer squaring Chiron energy, there is actually, it can be a catalyst for really deep healing. And having
yes.
people hear you is one of the best ways to really develop some sort of understanding. And there is a healing element to just being heard. Um, and it's also, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. There's a huge thunderstorm happening right over my house right now. So I don't know if you can hear it on the on the computer or not, but it's pretty impressive. But yeah, so one of the quickest ways that we can work on our own self-healing is allowing those kind of suppressed emotions and those old wounds to have an outlet and to be able to move through us and through our bodies, and be expressed and recognized and, let go of, because really holding on to all of that stuff, just it kind of festers and it creates, it'll keep coming up and keep cycling through, and it never really gets resolved. And so, um, you know, and that stuff can go way back. I mean, and not just this lifetime, but past lifetimes.
100%. Yep.
And that is a lot of the work that I do with people, is how to like figure out and let go of the emotions that we have stored in our subconscious that are affecting our daily lives. And so this, I feel like if you're feeling pulled to do some inner healing work at this time, this is a really beneficial moon energy to get into do the deep dive into what's been really kind of laying under the surface.
Yes. I think this moon is huge. I really do. I think it could be life-changing if you embrace it and really actively work with the energy to kind of address your emotional challenges in your life. You know, it's interesting, like right before this, July 2nd, obviously we had Neptune in Pisces going to retrograde, and that's gonna like play out through December 7th, I want to say. And that's really like you spending that whole time doing kind of this spiritual reflection. And it's interesting, we have this piece right before we kind of hit this moon, which is kind of a triggering moon. I'm going to go with that word. It's a triggering moon. So we have this like long-term cycle that's opened up for us really to grow and heal and do some deep reflection. And we kind of we're kicking it off with this triggering, with this moon, and this really like, we're going to put the emotions into the forefront because that's where we need to heal first. Because ultimately, that's what we want, right? We want to be able to communicate with people. We want to feel loved. Like all the material things that we have in this world really don't matter. What we really want is the feeling of safety and love within our life. And it's just that we live in this crazy world where, we have a tendency to focus everything on money, and it's really not about that. It's about that emotional connection that we have with each other. And with that, we have this Neptune retrograde, and then right on that same day, we had Mercury shift into Leo, and it really shifted our communication styles. So I feel like we have a lot of things coming into play. We have this shift in communication and how we're going to, you know, bring in and communicate with each other in our lives, and being a lot more free and open is what it's really pushing us to do during this time. And so you might have people who normally are a little bit quieter that are going to come up and speak their truth to you during this time. And so just, with that, go for it. It's going to be healing. Embrace it. Hear them out. So,
Yeah. So we do have, you mentioned that Neptune went retro in Pisces. We also had Saturn go retro in Pisces. And when planets go retrograde, they really slow down. And when we look at those outer planets that have these really long kind of transits, they're in retrograde for a significant amount of time. And it's almost like as they move forward, we make progress in a certain way. And then when they go retrograde, it's almost like the integration process. And so sometimes, I mean, with Mercury retrograde, that's annoying. We always give Mercury a bad time when it goes retrograde. But when the outer planets go retrograde, it's can be a really significant and beautiful alignment of letting things all fall into place the way that they need to before we move forward again. So it's kind of the slow. Sorry about that. It cut out. We are having this thunderstorm and lost power, but we are back. So just to kind of like recap, those outer planets that go retrograde, they are kind of more of an integration process for us. And with these being in Neptune, which is all about your intuition, your psychic development, kind of your spirituality, it's really an opportunity for you to develop like this deep inner trust in the flow of the universe, to let kind of like to lean into whatever divine support is being offered to you. And it's really this sense of going with the flow and removing resistance to the direction that life is trying to move you forward in, because we do have some other interesting alignments that are coming up that are potential movers and shakers in an unexpected way that can, if you are having resistance to this, it can really make things more difficult to you. And so it's kind of like this sense of like when you let go, you float and you kind of go with the flow of the river instead of trying to swim against it. And you're going to get to your destination a lot faster and probably even a better destination than you had originally anticipated. So
I like that.
yeah, a little bit of chaos thrown in the mix, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, it keeps things interesting. So that other alignment that I was talking about, we have Mars, which is in Taurus right now, which is actually usually a pretty kind of slowed down, steady, supportive energy. Because Mars can be kind of fast moving, and in Taurus, it already has that slowdown effect. But it's going to very soon come conjunct with Uranus, which is also in Taurus. And Mars has a much shorter time span in a sign, and Uranus has like a 7-year time span, but they're coming together at 25 degrees. So kind of at the end of Taurus, and they're going to be conjunct, which means they're at the same place. And Uranus is the planet of brings the energy of kind of like unexpected surprises, sudden shock,
Hmm.
out of the norm, things you didn't anticipate. And there can be some really big shakeups that happen when these two come together because Mars is kind of an action oriented, volatile, um, fast moving energy typically. You combine that with unexpected unexpected situations and it's a perfect pairing for things to unfold in ways you didn't expect or things to fall apart or um, and I'm getting ahead of myself with that, but typically when people think of things falling apart, they think of it as being something that they don't want. And yet we always try to remind you that when things are falling apart, it's typically because it's no longer in alignment and there's something better that is trying to be brought in. And so really leaning into that divine trust and removing the resistance is going to be a key factor here. So
That is definitely the tower moment piece right there.
absolutely.
Yes. And it's better just to, like you said, let it kind of happen naturally. Don't resist it. It's when you resist it that it becomes painful. So I'm
Yeah.
with you there. Just let it flow and really just be open to hearing communication, receiving communication, and not letting your ego override kind of that healing emotional side that we all need to get in touch with. And I really think that's the key to this moon and really not kind of like butting your head against a wall is really just letting it happen and being open to communication because if you're not willing to listen and you're not willing to feel into your emotions, the universe is really going to throw you a curveball right now, I think, and make you pay attention to that. So just be aware of that.
Mhm.
If you resist, it might not be so great. So,
Yeah, and it came up in a discussion in the Wild Reawakening group page about kind of this energy that is coming in that can be kind of like chaos. And it was kind of just a reminder like chaos is an interesting energy and we tend to put like a negative spin on chaos because we
yeah,
like order and we like to anticipate, we like to know what's going to happen. But if we think about it and we remove kind of our own ideas about what chaos is, like the comment came out like chaos creates universes. And so if we allow chaos to come and do whatever upheaval is necessary, it can really birth and create something really amazing and beautiful. But how how much interference are we going to try to like put in the mix that's going to potentially keep things from unfolding the way that they should? So uh, this
exactly.
this whole moon energy that we are going through is all about really leaning in to divine trust,
Yep.
your inner trust, your trust in the universe, your trust in allowing things to unfold. And really, there's such a divine feminine quality to that, to this moon in general, to really lean into those things.
Yep. I love that. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. There was one other aspect that's coming in as we were talking about Mercury, because Mercury has moved into Leo, which is a much more bold way of
Mhm.
communicating, as you were saying. And it's creating a trine to the North Node, and the North Node being kind of the direction we're moving in. And
Yep.
so you may find, and Mercury is also about communication. It's about how we receive information and express ourselves. And so you may find with this energy, since trine is a very positive aspect between the two, that you might develop some insights or awareness around your path forward or around the direction that you're going into. So just be open to whatever's coming in at this time and also about how you're communicating.
Yep. I do
Because
think that's key.
there is a huge reference to communication with this moon, um, which is interesting because Capricorn, I mean, not Cancers, can have a tendency to want to go into their shell and be more introspective. But there's really an element to this of getting really clear on how you communicate the information that you get, how you perceive the information that you get, not taking it personally.
Yep.
And so just pay attention to thoughts, emotions, and how they're kind of interplaying. And if they're interplaying in a positive way, or if you're letting your mind run away, you know, run away with things and creating stories that don't exist.
I like that. I think that's a perfect like sum up of what I was trying to get to, because the emotion part of it, I think, is part of this healing cycle that we're going through, but it's going to be kind of kicked out and brought into the forefront of, our conscious, because of the interplay with others and the people that we have relationships with. And emotions are not just solely like an internal thing. It's also how our emotions come into play with others, and making sure that we're aware of how others, how our interactions with others make them feel, as well as how it makes us feel, and knowing that there's a balance between it. And I, I, I just find this moon so interesting. I hope that it really awakens people and allows them to grow, because I really think that a lot of times emotions and communication just holds us back from where we want to go. So this, to me, even though it can be a shakeup, it can be really uncomfortable, I think this is a moment that could be truly transformational if you really embrace it. So
Yeah. And it's also, just to go back to kind of the beginning, it's very significant because it is this deeply divine feminine moon that is settled right in between the two very masculine energy Capricorn full moons, which doesn't typically happen. So if you didn't watch our last video about the Capricorn full moon, typically we have one full moon in a sign each year, but there are 13 moons. And so this happens to be the month where we're kind of starting with a Capricorn moon in Cancer energy, and then we're ending with a Capricorn full moon in Cancer energy. And it's really like bookends of this whole complete cycle that is happening this month. And so here we are at the midway point and interjecting this deeply like feminine, emotional aspect to this cycle that really has deep uh law, like, I want to say law and order, that's not what I meant, but kind of it's like the laws of the universe and the natural order of things,
yes.
which is very Capricorn Saturnian energy, is all about this is how you should do it, and this is how the way things are, and the rules, and the processes, and here we have this like energy that's coming in that's so opposite and go with the flow of things when you have all this restrictive energy on the outside. So um, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out.
I'm excited. It should be good. So, I mean, like, it's just your perception on it, right? I think
Mhm.
growth and experiencing, sometimes upheaval or, kind of sudden shocks, and it's okay. It'll help you grow when you just embrace it and kind of, like you said, go with the flow. I think that's probably the key, is not to get hurt or, stay in that kind of like like it's all about you. I think you just have to let it go and let it flow and be willing and open to hear other people. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone. I hope you have a great new moon. We will see you next time for the full moon in Capricorn part 2. Uh, remember to go to Wild Reawakening on Facebook and join the group. Amy's there doing some great work and has some classes coming out. So we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.